This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Catherine DiNuzzo is a licensed professional counselor in private practice who also operates Sacred Heart Mental Wellness. Catherine utilizes traditional cognitive behavioral counseling practices all through a Catholic lens. Her new book is titled The Catholic Guide Through Anxiety, and I'd like to welcome to Catholic Forum Catherine DiNuzzo. Thanks for taking time to be with us today, Catherine.
Oh, I'm so excited. Anytime I can talk about anxiety and help people, I'm excited. So glad that I get to work with you this morning.
Great. It's really glad to have you here. What did I forget on my introduction? What would you like to tell us about yourself?
Oh, I think that's the only thing is maybe that I have four amazing children and I have a wonderful husband. And I am from, my family's from Wilmington. And I feel like I have a connection with your listeners. My dad grew up in Jersey City. So I just feel that there's a connection. I'm excited to be here with you
Yeah,
today.
that's off. That's awesome. But you're living in the Midwest now, right?
Yes, we live in a small town called Beloit, Kansas. Our parish has about 300 families. Our town does not have a Walmart. It does have a grocery store and a hospital, so you can live without a Walmart. But really enjoy the small town living and just the community that happens. But at the end, if we have a funny story, I'll tell you about when my grandpa moved from Jersey to Kansas for us to care for him, and they gave him barbecue sauce on his meatballs. It did not go well. He was a very upset East Coast man in Kansas.
For an Italian from North Jersey getting barbecue sauce on his meatballs, he probably packed up and headed back east, right? Or
Pretty
wanted
much,
to.
he pulled me aside, so concerned. He's, Catherine, something happened. And when you have someone in the nursing home, you're always worried that someone's not caring for them. And he whispered in my ear and he said, they put barbecue sauce on their meatballs. I know, Grandpa, they do that here. We had to teach him the Kansas way.
That's funny. So, how did you become interested in mental health and becoming a counselor?
I really feel that I was called from a very young age. I like to tell myself that I am a firefighter for emotions. So even as a really young child, when there was someone was struggling or there was hardships, instead of running away from it, I just ran into it. And so did that from a very young age and learned more about what counseling was and went and got my teaching degree, which was amazing and really enjoyed helping students, but wanted to help deeper and wanted to be able to be more involved in their lives. And so went to counseling and just have really felt called to do those services ever since.
Did you start as a school counselor or did you go right into private practice?
Yeah, I started as a school counselor and then I actually worked with Veterans Upward Bound, which helps with veterans and PTSD and helping them get back to school. And I worked with vet centers, and that's really where I found my passion for anxiety. I
Mm-hmm.
had an amazing supervisor who really helped me to better understand the roots behind anxiety. And then as I learned more about it, and I left schools to go into private practice because I really wanted to be again on those front lines of the fire. And he taught me about how our bodies have a response to anxiety that's very normal and natural. It's just scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary to have those feelings. And our vets would think they were weak and bad. And here are these big, strong men who have fought battles and been in wars, and their body is so afraid of things that they know in their mind they shouldn't be afraid of. And when he taught me the science behind why they felt that way, it really inspired a passion for me that's now 15 years old to help people understand how God made them. And these feelings of anxiety aren't bad and they don't mean you're weak or crazy. And just that passion has grown over time into my private practice. And then the pandemic happened and I looked around and thought, oh no, it's going to get hard.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to get hard for a lot of people. And I also knew there were not enough of me to go around. The counselors were going to have long waiting lists, and we had to get out information on anxiety to give some tools to help people to better understand how they are created good and how if they understand that they can treat their anxiety.
Is that how Sacred Heart mental wellness came about? Was it a result of the pandemic?
It absolutely was. I was
Hmm.
sitting in adoration and I just knew that the world was going to struggle. When we think about the pandemic, we have to realize that humans in general, the first thing they do is fight, flight, or freeze, right? When a challenge comes, we're either going to run from the bear, or we're going to fight the bear, or we're going to freeze and get really quiet and hope the bear goes away. Well, what happened in the pandemic is when it first happened, our fight came in. We joined as communities, we worked together. There was a lot of that fight to get through that. But then as it went longer and longer, I could see that people were starting to flee, right? We were kind of separating, kind of going into isolation. And at that moment, I knew that we were going to have to offer resources to help people to kind of come back and to overcome what the pandemic has done to our mental health. And I decided I couldn't counsel everyone individually. I had to create resources that I wish every client I had knew coming into counseling. So they had knowledge that helped them beforehand. But then if they were going to another counselor or they weren't able to go to counseling, the resources would be very helpful and empowering. And also, I knew that a lot of people were going to love someone who had anxiety. There was going to be moms and dads and wives and husbands who had people who were struggling, who just didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to help. And I wanted to create a resource that was simple and easy to gain them skills to help be the support that they want to be, instead of what I tend to hear in the counseling office is, yeah, my mom tried to help, but all she does is make it worse. And I know that mom is so sad because she's just trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
So Sacred Heart Mental Wellness carries resources to help either yourself or to help someone you love who's struggling with anxiety.
Why did you decide to make it or call it Sacred Heart and give it a Catholic flavor or a foundation? I guess is better. Why Catholic?
Well, every time I sat in a secular training, I heard all of these strategies and I kept thinking, they're so Catholic, they don't even know it. And I think our church has already has so many of those strategies inside them. And so I wanted to give Catholics a place to realize that we don't have to leave the church to grow in our mental health. Because I think that there's a lot of pressure outside the world kind of telling people that if you have mental health struggles or you're having anxiety or depression or sadness, that we have to leave the church. And I really could see how everything that they were trying to do outside of the church was actually already in the church. I'd use we had it first. And so it really was good for me to be able to create a resource that helped people see how beautifully God made a church knowing how we were made. If we know we were made good and He made us knowing exactly what we need, it's not a surprise that He created a church that would give us what we need to help us through hard times.
So, how does one know that anxiety is, that they're experiencing is a mental health challenge, or whether they're just having, I hate to say the word normal fear or so forth? When does it become a problem?
I think that's a great question. And the way that I describe it for my clients, my goal for anyone with anxiety is that they make decisions for their life, not their anxiety makes their decisions for their life. So you know that you're really struggling when most of your decisions or a lot of your decisions are decided based on the fears that you have. Instead of you living your life, anxiety lives your life. Now, I think what you said was really good, and I hope everybody hears this, that the world has really painted anxiety as this very bad, horrible thing. But I truly believe we all feel it at some times. That fear is good. I teach my daughter all the time. You need to trust what I call that Holy Spirit nudge, that little bit of fear in you that's like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't do this. Right? I have a 13-year-old son, and I am trying to teach him that just because he thinks he wants to, jump over the vehicle or ride his bike off the roof, he might maybe it's not a good idea, right? Maybe we need to look at that little bit of fear and see like what God is using in that fear. But when that fear goes to the level where now I'm not visiting friends, now I'm not trying for that job, I have a lot of young adults who are so afraid to even enter the dating world because their fears and insecurities are so great. That's when we know that fear is now making the decisions for our lives instead of us making the decisions for our
Mm-hmm.
lives.
Mm-hmm. My guest today on Catholic Forum is Catherine DiNuzzo. Her book is titled The Catholic Guide Through Anxiety. Let's talk about the book, Catherine. Why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because every day I meet someone who believes that their anxiety makes them weak, crazy, they feel stupid, they just they doubt themselves because they have anxiety. And I wanted to create a resource that empowered people to see that they are created good and that these feelings of anxiety are natural and normal. They're just to the wrong stimulus. In my forward, I challenge and I say, at the end of this book, you'll be able to thank God for your anxiety. And anyone who has ever had anxiety looks at me and is like, oh, Catherine, she doesn't know. She doesn't know how bad my anxiety is. And the reality is, I do know. But once we can understand that we're not bad, then we realize that those feelings are normal and I can work to minimize them instead of what I call getting on the hamster wheel, which is when you're anxious that you're anxious, which makes me more anxious. That just keeps growing and growing. If
Mm-hmm.
we can stop in that moment of feeling anxious, we can thank God for our fight or flight response, which is really the feelings of anxiety. Then there are a number of strategies and prayers in the book to do in that moment to help you work through that anxiety so that it doesn't debilitate you. You don't get stuck in it.
Mm-hmm. I haven't had the opportunity to read the book yet, but it's got to be, if you tell somebody, well, just say a prayer or give it to God or whatever, I don't think would be very helpful. And I'm sure your book is more in depth than that.
I like to say it's a both and
Right.
because the beginning of the book is all about it's a very simply written, encouraging biology lesson. I've
Mm-hmm.
read lots of books, and no one talks about what's biologically happening in your body when you feel anxious. And so they don't know why they feel the way they do. So when I can explain how your brain processes the different stimulus it sees, and then you're like, oh, now I understand why I'm feeling anxious, then all the strategies work better. So, yes, are there strategies in the book about taking deep breaths and how do you slow your heart rate down so it tells your body that you're not in danger? That there isn't a big scary bear outside the door. It's just maybe it's your mother-in-law. Maybe it's a new employee that's coming in. Maybe, it's a test, but it's not a bear that we have to run from or we have to fight. We're able to help our bodies calm themselves. So there are 16 very like concrete examples, strategies, and tools to help navigate. But within that, I tried to seamlessly add the prayers that help us through those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a strategies to get off the hamster wheel to calm our physical body. But I also have learned that when we bring God into those moments, then that makes those, I call them superpower. I'm blessed to be a Catholic counselor because I get to bring God in, which makes my strategies, I say they're like on steroids because they just work better.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's not one or the other. It's about both. We need both. God made us as a both and.
Mm-hmm. So who did you write the book for? Is it just for Catholics? Could non-Catholics benefit from it? And how about to some? Is it just for someone who is experiencing anxiety, or could it be for their spouse or loved one who's trying to best learn how to help that person?
So honestly, I broke all the rules in writing a book because they say make a very small audience and write it to that small audience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I think about anxiety, I know that that small audience is everybody. So I intentionally wrote the book. It's only 130 pages long. there's a lot of content in those 130 pages, but I wanted a book that anyone could read, that was engaging. I write in the forward again, in the introduction, I talk about how I'm dyslexic and how I had to get help to write the book and overcome my dyslexia. So when you read the book, you can tell it's written by someone who's a dyslexic because it's very simple, easy broken down. So in one way, it's an easy book and it's not overwhelming for someone with anxiety. Also, all the information about the biology and the strategies are absolutely helpful for anyone. And I feel like there's nothing in the book that someone who's non-Catholic would be super would not be able to relate to. And the content about the biology and the strategies are so good that I just wish everyone had it. And so, yes, it is written for someone who is suffering from anxiety. Most of my readers or the ones who give me reviews say, this is the first time I felt seen. I felt heard, like someone gets me, because anxiety is so lonely. You just feel no one gets you. And so I wanted to write that. But I also made sure that I added things for those who were trying to understand someone who has anxiety, someone who loves someone so much and they're trying to help and they want to help walk with someone who is struggling, but they don't understand what it is or how it is. And so it really, truly tried to write it in a way that there was no obstacles for anyone to read it.
I was going to ask you what the response has been to the book, but you kind of covered that. It seems like this is really resonating with a lot of folks.
I think I really tried to feel that anxiety in the dark, and it's something that people know is out there and people are struggling with, but we're still not talking about. And so what I have learned from my book is that it's still hard for someone to ask me to come onto a podcast or to be in the conference or to send me to be a speaker. But the moment I get in front of a group of people and I start talking about it, you see the tears falling because they're like, that's me. And they finally have hope. They finally feel seen. So when people read the book, I think there's always this feeling of like, do I want to read the anxiety book? But once they do, they're thinking, oh, I'm so glad I did. And then they're giving it to their friends and they're giving it to their friends. And I always recommend for people who have someone in their life who maybe wouldn't say, oh, please give me this book. I want to read something on anxiety. What I've learned is you can put it, on the dining room table, in their car, in the bookshelf, and you would be surprised how many times that book is taken and read. I was even blessed to speak to a bunch of high schoolers at a family conference. And they're like, Catherine, we really want you to talk to our high schoolers. And I'm thinking, oh, what high schooler wants to have an anxiety talk, right? None. I thought no one was going to enjoy this talk, and I was just going to be pulling teeth to get the high schoolers to care. But what surprised me and the speakers who put on the conference was that I was voted the best speaker of the conference for those teens. I was the one that they enjoyed the most and got the most help from because they are struggling and they don't know how to get out of it. They feel so stuck. And so really it's that I'm in that very hard, challenging part of trying to get out the word where it's still very new. And I think there's some hesitation of talking about it. But I appreciate people like yourself who aren't afraid to say, we got to start this conversation.
What? How do you avoid anxiety? Is there a way to live life where you don't get into one of these ruts or you don't climb onto the hamster wheel?
The way that I like to describe it for my clients is two ways. So one is I don't think we can avoid anxiety because because our fight or flight response is real and natural. So I like to describe it similar to the military. So the military trains most of the time for war. They know they might go to war, but there's a chance they might not go to war. But they train and train so that the day war comes that they're not afraid. They have muscle memory. They know what to do. But hopefully there's no war. Another example that I like to give of what Catholic mental wellness is it's the same concept, but I like to use waves. And, being in Delaware, I'm imagining, actually, I will be totally honest, Rehoboth Beach is where this analogy came. because I
Wow.
had done this with my cousin Chris growing up.
Mhm.
We would go to the beach, and there was two ways that you could deal with the waves. You can see the wave, and then you jump right when it crests, and you turn your back on it, and the wave kind of smacks you with all the water, and the water gets in your eyes and the hair, and you're just kind of discombobulated, and you're that way just long enough until you can like clear your eyes, get your hair back, and the next wave comes, and you jump and you turn your back on that wave, and you do it again, and you keep doing it. It's really exhausting, and
Mhm.
you end up with like sand in your hair and your eyes, and it's miserable. And that's what I was born in Colorado. So that's how I did it until my cousin taught me, Catherine, you can just look at the waves. And when you see them coming, you just dive under them. And then when you come up, the water's out of your face, the hair's out of your face, and you have a lot of time to catch your breath before the next wave comes. And so when we think of anxiety that way, we are not promised no waves in our life. We know those waves are going to come. And sometimes they're when the tide are in, and then there's sometimes when the tide is out. And those waves are very different. But if we can learn how to navigate those waves, if we can learn how to dive into those waves and allow that water to run over our backs and we can look up, then we're ready for the next one. But when we don't know how to navigate anxiety, when we don't have mental wellness or know how to deal with those challenges, it feels like our whole life is being knocked down by these waves with our hair in the sand and everything in our face. And it's just very hard to get a rhythm and ever feel like you have a break.
That's great advice, and I'm glad that your trip to Rehoboth Beach will end up helping a lot of people deal with their anxiety. So, if people want to get more information about you, about your work, about the Sacred Heart mental wellness program, and maybe even buy a copy of your book, would you think is this the website where they should go?
Absolutely. If you go on to sacredheartmentalwellness.com, there's a lot of free resources. So those are very nice. One of the things I would recommend is you can take I have a free mental wellness assessment. And what it'll
Mm-hmm.
do is it'll help you see kind of where you're at and where are areas you can improve on so that you can see where you are on your mental wellness journey. Are you getting smacked by the waves? Are you learning how to swim in the waves, or are you mastering the waves? You kind of can see where you fit into those areas. There's also videos that you can purchase. So not everyone likes to read a book. So I wanted to create the understanding the biology video, which really helps you to. It has the information from the book, but it's not as full. So if you just want the basic information, there's a video there. There's also a mental wellness video, which just explains how do I gain mental wellness? What am I striving for? Because it really is a new concept. Mental health has always been seen as a crisis or something negative. So if we can change that, this is how we know what we're striving for. There's also a number of podcasts, and you can get my book. There's also an e-version of the book. And then there's also a place where you can book me as a speaker if you want to bring me to your church, to your youth group, to your conference, so that we can start empowering our church to look to the church to help with their mental wellness.
Wonderful. Catherine DiNuzzo, thanks so much. The book is titled The Catholic Guide Through Anxiety. The website is sacredheartmentalwellness.com. Thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Forum. Come visit us in Delaware sometime.
I hope to. I definitely have lots of family, and I need some saltwater taffy and some cheese steaks for sure.
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much. Take care. God bless.
Bye bye.